first, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Stephen B. Pearl. The B is so it's easy to find me on the internet. And I am a writer with 8 novels to my credit, as well as numerous entries into various anthologies. And admittedly, 2 of the novels are only available in ebook, but they still count, at least in this day and age. The other 6 are available at my stand in the dealer's room, and I say that, and then on Amazon. Of course I have to plug myself. I'm an author. This is the reality. Now,
So my name is Rigel Chiokis. From 1997 to 2001, I pursued one of my dreams, not to be a science fiction writer, but to be a science fiction editor. At the time, there were perhaps 5 of those jobs on the North American continent, so to be an editor, I had to create my own job. I did that by publishing my own magazine called Spaceways Weekly. We were on the cutting edge. We were doing electronic publication using email. The biggest problem we ran into is people saying, well, I don't want to read on a computer screen. We still have those big CRT monitors that bored holes through your head with the ion guns, and that problem has been solved. Everybody reads on a screen now. So next year, I'm going to use crowdfunding to get my publishing company up and running again. And if you want to be kept in the loop about that market opening up, I have a card up here with an email address. You send me your name and email address, and I will let you know when Spaceways Weekly is open for submissions again. So the format here today, for the first part, Stephen's going to talk to you about the whole concept of being a writer and some of the skills you should focus on, the things you do as a writer. And then after he's done, I will discuss the whole publishing system. Once you've got the story written, how the heck do you get it published? So, Stephen.
okay. And I will mention I have cards here as well. So, the first thing I'm going to do, and I apologize, I'm going to step on your toes just a little bit because I have a great story.
Okay.
Years ago, I was speaking to Mr. McCullum of McCullum and Stewart Publishing. And lovely gentleman, deceased now, unfortunately, but he told me that out of every 5,000 books that are received by a major publisher, they will publish 3. Of those 3, one will make money, one will lose money, and one will break even. So, right now, your odds are 3 in 5,000. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing you can do very quickly, and I'm hoping that you'll reiterate this as well. Follow the submission guidelines. Yeah! That will raise your 9 out of 10 books are rejected because the author did not follow the submission guidelines. The editor is not looking to publish you. He's looking to reject your manuscript so he can clear the pile of paper on his desk. That is the reality of this industry. So, 9 out of 10. So you can raise your odds to 3 in 500 from 3 in 5,000 by that simple expedient. Follow the guidelines. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of writing. First off, good science fiction is grounded in science fact. Don't have your characters doing something impossible. Now, highly improbable? Fine. You want to have warp drive? That's fine. We have models for warp drive. We don't know whether they'll work or not, but we do have models for them. But don't have somebody bouncing around in outer space without a pressure suit. It just makes for bad science fiction. It can be a very nebulous grounding. I have done it myself with in an unpublished work where I have used some very, very preliminary findings into the nature of the Big Bang to empower my faster-than-light drive. Very nebulous, but it's still acceptable. Now, the best example of good science being used I can draw from my own work is my Tinker series, which is a post-apocalyptic series. And every piece of technology in that is either based on something we have or something that's currently in the preliminary stages. So I'm just going to move on from that. Right. Write what you know, or you can find out. Popular Science is a wonderful resource, great magazine, encyclopedias, and personal experience. Now the other thing, moving on from that completely, get on with it. Courses are great, okay? Take a couple of writing courses. Get the fundamentals. Then, stop taking courses and actually write something. There's a lot of people who go around, I want to be a writer, I want to be a writer, I want to be a writer. What have you written? Well, I've been taking this class, I've been taking that class, I've been taking that. Fine. Outside of the assignments from those classes, what have you written? And if you were really serious, the assignments from those classes would be the gem of what you were going to eventually turn into something publishable. So, get on with it. You just do it. Now, there's a couple of different ways of going around this, about this. There's what's called planners and pantsers for writing style. And my own writing style, I am a pantser. It means fly by the seat of your pants. When I go into a book, I have a vague idea of where I want it to end, of a couple of scenes in the middle, and no idea what else is going on. And for me, writing is an experience very much like fantasy role-playing gaming. I put my characters with their skill sets into a world, and then I throw situations at them and let the characters figure it out. I'm sure if my characters ever actually came to life and stepped out of the page, the first thing they would do is hunt me down and torture me to death. They have ample reason to hate me. But that is pantsing. And it's a perfectly legitimate way of writing. Some of the classes will tell you, oh, you have to plan everything out, blah, 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 blah. Put it on index cards, make your story arc, be very mechanical. You know what? That's also a perfectly legitimate way of writing. My favorite living author, Jim Butcher, is the ultimate planner. He's on the other extreme of the spectrum. Interestingly enough, we've turned out some works that are very similar to each other. But you can be anywhere on that continuum, and don't let anyone tell you it's wrong to be anywhere on that continuum. So planner or pantser, do what works for you. Show, don't tell. This is another aspect of writing. And I'm sure that anybody who's a prospective writer in this room has heard it. Uttered like a bunch of demented parrots squawking from the treetops. Show, don't tell! Show, don't tell! Show, don't tell! What does it mean? It's a really simple concept. Set up situations and scenes in your writing that inform the reader, that show the reader what you want them to come away with, as opposed to just telling them. You can just say, Bert was an excellent engineer. Okay, shrug. Bert lay on his back, desperately trying to tinker the warp drive back into function before the black hole imploded. A little bit more grabbing. But it's saying the same thing. This guy knows his stuff with engineering. So, start with a bang. These are all, by the way, all of these, by doing it, you are showing that you have the fundamentals of good writing, and that makes it more likely that you're going to be able to move that 3 and 500 up to actually getting something published. Start with a bang. In commercial fiction, you want to grab your reader right off the bat. You don't have to introduce your primary conflict right away. I like to use what I call the James Bond formula. If you notice, any of the Bond films starts with an action sequence that is probably the last section of his previous mission. And you are right into something that is really grabbing, really exciting, and engages you as an audience. You want to do the same thing with a book. It doesn't have to be the primary conflict. In Tinker's Play, I start off with having a child running towards my Tinker, the Doctor of General Applied Technology with some medical trainings, wagon, and babbling at him through a cleft palate and getting across that his mother was having a difficult delivery and she might die. Has nothing to do with the primary conflict of the book. But it was a conflict that I could throw in really fast, engages the reader because it's something that is almost universal, so it's grabbing. And then I could use it to spin out into introducing my characters, giving the necessary description, begin the introduction of my world. So, start with a bang. Also, avoid description. It's really counterintuitive. People like to start with description because it's how we experience the world. You walked in this room, and the first thing you experienced was the room, where people were sitting, the fact that there's chairs. You saw it. That was how you experienced it. When you're talking about books, that big, long, drawn-out description that you want to give will turn people off. Now, by the way, the other thing I want to mention about all of these, none of these are hard and fast laws. There are guidelines to good writing. There is no such thing as a hard and fast, never break it rule. So, but these are the guidelines. And if you're going to break them, understand why you're breaking them and how to do it effectively. So, don't start with description. It's off-putting. Action or dialogue. The action may be, he sprinted. He jumped. She parasailed. It doesn't really matter what the action is, as long as it's something that engages it. Go for a verb feel. And then, as much as you can, drop description in on the fly. Because there are a lot of people who, whenever you come to a new scene, and this is a fairly common beginner's mistake, everything stops to describe the world around you. And they get into minutiae of detail. Avoid that. If you are going to describe the brass candlesticks on the mantelpiece in chapter 1, in chapter 27, somebody had better be hit over the head with one of them. You put in what is necessary for the scene to work and allow your reader to engage, because really reading books are a cooperative effort. You, the writer, put coat hooks that the reader can hang their coat on and build the world for themselves. If you take the written description of most characters in most books and gave them to a police sketch artist, he'd sort of go, and? Because she was a dark-haired beauty. Okay. He was tall, muscular, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Okay. Pick him out of a police lineup. But for the purposes of fiction, it's usually a good enough description. That's because you're engaging your reader's imagination. And that's the other thing you have to be aware of. You're catering to your reader. And every reader is going to have a different take on your book. That's one of the glorious things about writing that you don't really get so much with television because so much is fed to you. Television, movies really define far more than the writer does. Now, I have first paragraph sells speech. And that is, your first line sells your first paragraph. Your first paragraph sells your first page. Your first page sells your first 10 pages. Your first 10 pages sell your book. And you think about how people buy. They'll pick up a book, they'll read the cover blurb, they'll open it up, they'll normally read the first line. And if that line grabs them, engages them, then they'll buy the book. And this is what editors are looking for. Editors want something that is going to make them money. They really don't care that much about message or social conscience or any of these things. It's a business, especially commercial fiction, and that's what I am. I'm a commercial writer. It's a little bit different when you get into some of the other areas like literary and so forth. But even there, the publisher wants to make money. If they don't make money, they go out of business and nobody gets published. So they're looking for that. And as I said before, do it with dialogue. Dialogue is a wonderful tool. And any piece of commercial fiction should be at least 1/3 dialogue. Because it allows you to build your world in a way that seems like you're not building your world. Character and voice serves many purposes. It tells you about the character. If I say, the cat is in the window. Okay, that's one thing. The bloody cat's in the window again. Aw, cat's in the window. God blimey, Governor, that cat's in the window. By choosing the words for your character dialogue, you expound that character. You tell the reader a whole story about that character, their background. A medical doctor might say, well, if he's a pompous prat, might say, he has bilateral periorbital ecchymosis. A non-prat doctor will say, he's got 2 black eyes. And most laymen will go, he's got 2 black eyes. But you can use professional jargon to define a person's knowledge base. You can also use it to show his character. You can use their speech to show their character. And, yeah, their profession in a lot of ways. Now, there's a couple of little tricks. If you want to show that somebody is uneducated, an interesting thing you can do with your writing is take ing and turn it to in apostrophe. He's doing this. They're saying that. And it will give the impression that this person has not had a refined upbringing. Doesn't mean they're stupid. And anybody who thinks it does hasn't spoken to a lot of people that I've spoken to who do this and can strip down a car and put it back together and the dang thing runs. But they've lacked the sophistication in their formative years. The other one is there, or They're doing it. Doing it. You're doing it. You're doing it. All these little things that drop a letter, and it will drive Word crazy. Because Word hates it. Word wants everybody to sound like they were raised with perfect English tutors. But when you're writing character, that's not how people are. People mutilate the language every day, and the way that we mutilate the language tells a lot about who we are. Another thing to do, I have a horrible thing I do in my rough drafts. And I'm going to talk about rough drafts in a moment. I do this horrible thing called, basically I put okay. I really overuse okay. One time in a class I was teaching, it was a half-hour class, I said okay 106 times. Somebody was counting. And it comes through in my writing. So, I use one of the greatest friends a writer can have, the search and replace command. And I go through and I will search for okay. And I will remove it, and I will change it to yes, or fine, or whatever. In my novel Nuki Kubai, I had done that. And when I went through, I changed there was one instance of one character saying okay, other than my lead. I made it an idiosyncrasy of my lead's speech that he overuses okay. And this one incident was incredibly appropriate for somebody to say okay, being from Western culture. So you can do that. Give a word that certain of your characters, they're the only one that uses it. And that will help identify the character in speech to the reader and will move your story along and be kind of interesting. Avoid repetition, which is don't use a word in proximity to itself or its derivatives. Try to mix up your language. You can't always do it, but if you can, it's a good thing because it makes the read more interesting. Make your cast based on the cast of your book, based on the world that you want. Don't be afraid of using people of various and sundry races, creeds, etc., etc. Mix it up. However, understand that this has to be done with a degree of sensitivity. Don't go for stereotypes. People are people. Show respect. And also, in doing that, I will warn you that you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. People are going to get on your case if you have a monochromatic cast in your book, and they're going to get on your case if you use people of various and sundry ethnicities, simply because people want to get on your case. In Horror of the KRAKEN, which is a Norse fantasy adventure, I actually use almost exclusively Caucasians because it's set in the 900s in Northern Europe. There's not too much diversity going on. Now, stop me when action. Keep track of it. Use graph paper if you need to, and like fight scenes and so forth. You can use gaming grids. Follow the logic. Avoid convenient solutions. No equipment that just happens to pop up. Think. Put some effort in. And I'm almost out of time here. But a good example of that is Tolkien and the rope setup that he used, where he set up the rope being in the bag in Lothlorien, and it was later in Return of the King that they used it. And one thing that I really want to stress, say it once, say it well, say it when it matters, then leave it alone. Describe it once, don't repeat yourself, but say it well and when it matters to the story. Because a lot of people use a lot of wasted words on that. Never use a $20 word where a $2 word will do. And a cardinal rule, first drafts are crap. Put this in your ledger. Nobody does a good first draft. They're horrible. Hemingway said good writing was rewriting. He was right. And, oh yes, and when you are getting editorial input, never reply to an edit or a critique the day you receive it. Read it, sleep on it, divorce yourself from the emotion, and then thank the person. You don't have to take the advice, but the advice from other people is golden. I went through a long time in the It's My Baby and You Can't Touch It stage, and I wasted years. And it's a horrible waste of time, a waste of a good writer. Keys to the Kingdom. www.critters.org. That is the Critters Online Writers Group. And they will take your baby, tear it apart, throw it back at you, and say, rebuild this. Better, stronger, faster than before. And this is where you're going to get input that will turn you from 3 and 500 to one of the three. And I'll pass it on to you.